Story number one. I don't know why I'm even writing this down. Maybe it's because it's been eating at me for too long. Maybe because I want to convince myself that what happened had some kind of explanation, even if I'll never really believe it. This all started a year ago, and I can't shake the thought that I'm just waiting for my turn. Back then, my friends and I had this thing where we'd explore places no one bothered with anymore. Abandoned factories, drained pools, forgotten railway tracks, you name it. Cal, Lauren, Jack, Mike, and me. We weren't thrill seekers exactly, just bored kids who liked the kind of adrenaline you can't get sitting at home. It was stupid, I know, but it felt good to do something that wasn't ordinary. One night Mike brought up this cemetery at the very end of town, said it was old, barely used, and no one went there anymore. Of course, he suggested we check it out. That's how we ended up there at 1 in the morning, climbing the rusted gates like we owned the place. I was the only one sober. The others immediately lit up and cracked open beers, laughing too loud for where we were. I don't know why I stayed sober that night. Maybe instinct. Maybe fate. They passed around joints and started their usual nonsense, shouting jokes, swearing at each other, tossing empty cans into the weeds. After an hour, they were gone, red-eyed, stumbling, barely able to hold their cigarettes without burning their own fingers. I just sat there on the grass, trying not to feel uncomfortable. I don't believe in ghosts exactly, but I've always had this thing about respecting the dead. Cemeteries feel like someone else's living room, not a place to party. That's when it happened. I was watching them laugh when I noticed something behind them. Just for a second, someone was standing there, not moving, just watching. I swear I saw eyes. Yellow eyes, glowing like an animal caught in headlights. I blinked and it was gone. I didn't say anything. I just sat there with my chest tight, heart hammering against my ribs. The noises started next. A sharp mechanical whine. It was like someone had fired up a saw in the middle of the cemetery. Loud. Too close. The sound buzzed in my ears, then cut off suddenly, like whoever held it just let go. The others barely reacted, too high to notice, but I could feel it in the air, vibrating through my skin. Then footsteps, slow, dragging, coming toward us on the gravel paths between the stones. I froze, listening, while the others argued about who had more weed left. I knew we needed to leave. I don't know how I convinced them, but I did, probably more out of annoyance than fear, since they could barely stand straight by then. We climbed back over the gate, still laughing, still mocking. But that night was only the beginning. The first was Mike. A couple of months later, I woke up to the news that he'd died in a car crash. People said he'd been drinking, lost control, hit a divider, died instantly. Everyone just called it an accident, but all I could think about was the glowing eyes behind him that night. Next was Jack. I was actually there for that one. He'd been working in his garage, cutting up wood for some project. He asked me to come over and help. I was standing near the doorway when the circular saw he was using suddenly jerked, like it had been yanked out of his hand by something invisible. It came down on his leg before he could move. The sound, the scream, it still haunts me. He survived, but he lost the leg. He told everyone it was just a mistake, but I know what I saw. That saw didn't just slip. Then came California. Perfectly healthy one day, collapsed the next. Doctors said he fell into a coma with no clear cause. They ran tests, scans, everything. Nothing. It's been months and he hasn't woken up. His mom sometimes tells me she hears him mumble in his sleep, like he's talking to someone. Lauren was the last, or maybe not the last. Maybe just the last before me. He started acting strange, muttering to himself, scratching at his arms like something was crawling under his skin. One night, his parents found him wandering the street barefoot, yelling at the shadows. Now he's in an asylum. When I visit him, he won't talk, but sometimes he looks past me, his eyes wide like someone standing behind me. Once he smiled at the empty corner of the room, like he knew something I didn't. And then there's me. I keep telling myself it's all coincidence. Drunk driving accidents happen, power tools slip, people fall sick out of nowhere. Mental illness isn't exactly rare. There are 100 rational ways to explain all of it. But then I go to sleep and wake up at exactly 3:07 every night. Not 3:06, not 3:08, always 3:07. My room feels colder than the rest of the house when it happens. Sometimes I hear faint buzzing, like that saw from the cemetery. Once I swear I heard footsteps stop right outside my bedroom door. I've started avoiding mirrors. A couple of weeks ago, brushing my teeth, I glanced up and thought I saw something behind me in the reflection. Yellow eyes again, just for a heartbeat. I turned and of course nothing was there. Sometimes I wonder if it's just guilt. Survivor's guilt, maybe. I was the only one sober that night, the only one who remembers clearly. Maybe my brain is making connections that aren't there. Maybe I'm just scaring myself because the alternative, that the dead are punishing us, is too insane to admit. But I can't shake it. The cemetery wasn't normal. The sound of the saw, the footsteps, the eyes, they weren't hallucinations. I know what I felt. I know what I saw. And yet, here I am, still alive, still waiting. Every day feels like borrowed time. Every time I cross the street, I half expect a car to come out of nowhere. Every time I use the kitchen knives, I imagine one slipping toward me. Sometimes I think about Cal and his coma and wonder if that's worse. Being trapped in silence, knowing something is holding you down, waiting until it's your turn to be dragged deeper. I don't know why I'm still here. Maybe I respected the cemetery. Maybe that saved me. Or maybe it's just not my time yet. But when I wake up at 3:07, staring into the darkness, heart pounding as I wait for the footsteps to start again, I can't help but wonder, how much longer do I have before it's me? Story number 2. When I was 9, I had this loft bed with a desk tucked underneath. It wasn't anything special, but I remember liking it because it made me feel grown up, like I had my own little space. I've always been a ridiculously heavy sleeper. I could fall asleep on a bus, at family functions, even once at a carnival. So it was strange when I started waking up at the exact same time every night, 3 a.m. At first I brushed it off, but then I started hearing things from the attic. My bed was high enough that the ceiling was just a couple of feet above my head, and directly above that was the attic crawl space. The noises started small, a faint shuffle like something brushing against the insulation. Then it turned into thuds, knocks, sometimes what sounded like boxes dragging across the floor. My 9-year-old brain tried to rationalize it. I told myself it had to be a raccoon or a bird that got stuck up there. Still, after nights of broken sleep, I decided to knock back. I can't explain why I thought that was a good idea, but I balled up my fist and rapped the ceiling 3 times. I waited in silence, heart racing. Nothing. I actually started drifting off when I heard it. A slow, deliberate set of knocks coming from directly above me, mimicking my exact rhythm. From that night on, it became a routine. I'd wake up, knock, sometimes get a response. The attic knocks felt heavy, like knuckles dragging hard on wood. It never came right away. It always waited until I was on the edge of falling asleep again, which made it worse. It went on for months, then years. The knocks faded eventually, or maybe I just got used to ignoring them. Still, the habit stuck. I wake up at 3 a.m. every single night, no matter what. The weird part? It only happens in my house. If I sleep in a hotel, at a friend's, anywhere else, I sleep through the night without issue. Fast forward 13 years. I'm an adult now, living in the same house. I should have outgrown being freaked out by noises, but lately it feels like everything has ramped up again. The attic shuffling is back, louder than ever. Things in the house don't stay where I leave them. My dogs and cat will just sit and stare at one blank corner of the room like something is standing there. And then there's the whispers. It always happens when I'm lying in bed, waiting to drift off. I'll hear my name said low, right in my ear, so close I swear I feel the warmth of breath on my skin. Sometimes it's a rasp, other times almost sing-song, but always right beside me. I'll bolt upright, turn the lights on, check every corner. Nothing. And I'm left sitting there, adrenaline pumping, wide awake until the sun comes up. One time while cooking, I glanced out the kitchen window without thinking. Just for a split second, there was a face on the other side of the glass. It wasn't just a reflection or shadow. It was a man's face, but melted, like his skin had been charred and stuck to the pane. The mouth hung too wide, the eyes were dark pits. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The yard was empty. I didn't drop the pan, didn't scream. I just froze, staring at my own wide-eyed reflection in the glass. Since then, I've noticed more subtle things. The TV remote shows up in the bathroom sink. My keys vanish until I find them lined up in a perfect row on the counter. My closet door, which I always keep shut, will be cracked open just enough for darkness to spill through. My pets refuse to sleep in my room anymore. They whine at the threshold like there's something already occupying the space. Sometimes I'll be walking down the hall and feel like someone is behind me, but when I turn, it's just empty air. Other times, I'll be sitting at my desk and swear I see movement in my peripheral vision. Shadows stretching where there should be none. Shapes crouching low before disappearing when I look directly. The attic has been the worst lately. I don't knock anymore, but the sounds are more insistent than ever. Boxes dragging, things falling, a slow pacing back and forth like someone waiting. Last week, I swear I heard something scratch the ceiling above my bed, long and deliberate, as if nails were dragging along the wood. I laid there staring at the ceiling a foot from my face, barely breathing. I told myself it was just mice, but mice don't knock back. Mice don't mimic your rhythms. The rational part of me still tries to explain it all away. Sleep paralysis could explain the whispers and the sensation of breath. The noises might be animals nesting. The face at the window could have been a trick of the light. Maybe my own reflection distorted by steam from the stove. The keys and remote moving? I could be forgetting where I put them. But then there's the pattern, the timing, the fact that no matter what, I wake up at 3 a.m. without fail, like something is making sure I'm awake. The feeling that I'm not alone in my own house anymore. Lately, I've started hearing faint knocks again. Not every night, but enough. Always coming from right above me when I'm almost asleep. Sometimes it's just one sharp tap. Other times it's the same rhythm I used as a kid, 3 quick raps. I lie there staring at the ceiling, refusing to answer back. I tell myself I won't engage. I tell myself it's all in my head. But deep down, I can't shake the thought that maybe I started something all those years ago. And maybe, whatever it is, it's still waiting for me to reply. For now, I keep the lights on. I keep the attic door shut. And every night, when 3 a.m. rolls around, I try not to listen. But the knocks are getting harder to ignore. Story number 3. I grew up in a house that I still can't think about without my stomach tightening. It looked normal from the outside. A basic 2-story suburban home with a patchy front yard and a garage that barely fit our old sedan. But inside, there was something off. Even as a kid, I could feel it. It wasn't the kind of fear kids usually have about the dark. I wasn't scared of shadows under the bed or monsters in the closet at school or at friends' houses. It was only in our house. The dark there had a weight, like the air itself pressed on your chest. It was a feeling of being observed, not always directly, but from a corner, from the space just beyond your line of sight. I knew even then that there was something in the house that didn't belong to us. The first thing I remember clearly were the red eyes. I must have been 6 or 7. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and if I looked toward the living room, I'd see them, hanging in the air, 2 glowing points, sometimes high like they were level with a standing adult, sometimes lower like something crouching. They never blinked. They never moved when I stared at them, just hovering in the darkness, pulsing faintly. I told myself it had to be headlights from outside, or a reflection off the TV screen, but that explanation never really fit. No car sat outside at those hours, and the TV was unplugged at night. There was a period around 3rd grade where things escalated. That's when the orbs began. I'd be lying in bed, not quite asleep, and these faint glowing balls would just appear. They weren't harsh lights, more like floating dust motes that shimmered in blue-white. Sometimes 1, sometimes 3 or 4, just drifting around my room. They stayed for minutes at a time, long enough for me to sit up and watch them move around. My brain tried to make sense of it. Aliens, spirits, something. But deep down, I just knew they weren't supposed to be there. That's when I also started drawing things I couldn't explain. One day, my mom found a picture in my notebook, a charcoal-like scribble of a tall, stretched-out figure with long arms reaching to the floor. She asked me why I drew something so creepy, but I didn't remember drawing it. I recognized my handwriting, my little kid scrawl labeling it "The Tall Man," but I had no memory of making the picture. It wasn't even in my usual style. It was too precise, too shadowy, too deliberate. That drawing is still in a box somewhere, though I've never had the courage to dig it out. The house's atmosphere wasn't just visual either. It was a constant pressure, like the air itself carried tension. When I was alone, I'd feel it most. My skin would prickle as if static was in the room, my ears straining for sounds that weren't there. The creaks of the house had a rhythm, not random settling but measured, like footsteps upstairs when no one else was home. The staircase always felt like it was waiting for me. I would run up as fast as I could because walking slowly made it feel like something was inches behind me, ready to grab. By high school, I'd almost convinced myself that I'd grown out of it. But one summer, when most families on our street left for vacations, the house showed me it wasn't done. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I was brushing my teeth when I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Through the bathroom window, I saw a shadow slip out of the garage door. My first thought was my dad, even though he was usually asleep by then. The figure walked stiffly, almost gliding. Then, clear as day, I heard my dad's voice from outside, screaming. Not words, just raw panic. I bolted out of the bathroom, heart hammering. I ran through the kitchen, out the back door, expecting to see him. But when I got outside, the yard was empty. The figure I thought I saw was gone. The garage door was closed. I sprinted upstairs to my parents' room, and there was my dad, half asleep and annoyed at me for barging in. He had no idea what I was talking about. I tried to brush it off, but as soon as I lay down in bed, it started again. The scream. Same voice, same terror, coming from outside the window this time. I froze in bed, too scared to move. My body wanted to run, but my brain screamed that if I looked out the window, I'd see something waiting for me. After what felt like hours, I dragged a blanket downstairs and curled up on the couch, as if sleeping closer to the front door would somehow protect me. The screaming didn't happen again that night, but I couldn't shake the sense that something had been calling to me, luring me outside. That wasn't the only night. After that, things happened in patterns. Sometimes the smell of something burning would wake me, though the house was silent and the stove cold. Sometimes my bed sheets would be pulled so tight I'd struggle to move, as if someone had tucked me in with military precision while I slept. The worst was the sound of breathing, slow, deep breaths, steady, inches from my ear, while I lay frozen under the covers. Every time I forced myself to check, the room was empty, though the air still felt disturbed, like someone had just left. I can still describe the exact quality of that tension. It was like being prey. The house didn't want me gone. It wanted me there, cornered, afraid, feeding it. I left that house after college, and for a while I convinced myself it was just childhood paranoia. That maybe the eyes were headlights, the orbs were dust, the screams were a dream layered over reality. But even now, years later, I'll be walking alone at night and get that same crawling sense up my back, that same whisper of breath against my ear. I've had apartments, stayed in hotels, even lived overseas for a while, and none of those places felt like that house. Only there did the dark itself feel alive, aware, almost patient. The worst part is, I still have that drawing, the one of the tall man. I keep telling myself I should throw it out, but every time I hold the box, I can't bring myself to lift it. It's like a weight, a reminder that whatever was in that house isn't necessarily gone. Maybe it's just waiting. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night in my current place, I swear I see faint red dots hovering by the door, like a pair of eyes checking in. I blink and they're gone, but the feeling lingers. Story number 4. I never believed in haunted places. I liked reading about them, sure, but I always filed them under exaggerations or local legends. Last summer I visited France, and while Paris was everything I had imagined, I wanted something different, something less crowded. That's how I ended up planning a week-long stay near an old fort west of Versailles. It was supposed to be one of those quiet historical vacations. Just me, my camera, some reading, and the fort tours. nothing more. But that trip ended up becoming the strangest, most terrifying experience of my life. The first day was normal enough. I checked into a small hotel a short walk from the fort. The room was simple but cozy, with a view of the cobblestone street outside. I unpacked, read for a bit, and then went to bed earlier than I usually do, thanks to the jet lag. The next morning, however, things didn't make sense. I woke up not in my bed, not even in my hotel room, but in a basement. A damp, cold basement. The stone floor was uneven, covered in dust, and the air reeked of mildew. There were broken chairs stacked in the corner and rusty pipes running along the ceiling. It took me a second to even recognize it was the basement of the same hotel. I had glimpsed the door marked "Service Only" near the lobby the day before. I don't sleepwalk, never have. I woke up fully dressed too. My heart raced, but I forced myself to think logically. Maybe I'd gone down there in some half-conscious state. Maybe jet lag had done something weird. Still, it was unnerving to start the day that way. I shook it off, went upstairs, and after breakfast, made my way to the fort. The place was stunning at first glance. Massive stone walls stretched across the hill with heavy gates and towers. Inside, there were long hallways, vaulted ceilings, and carvings on the walls that looked ancient. But the unsettling part was how the fort seemed to swallow sound. Even with tourists around, I could hear my own breathing louder than their chatter. I pulled out my camera, brand new, bought specifically for this trip. But the moment I tried to take a picture, it glitched. Either the screen froze or the battery suddenly drained. I thought it was a fluke, but it kept happening. I switched batteries, even tried my phone camera, and the same thing happened. Frozen screens, black frames. Yet the moment I stepped outside the fort gates, both devices worked perfectly again. That night, I made sure to lock my room and double-check the windows. I even pushed a chair against the door. Still, the next morning, I woke up at the edge of the lake near the fort. I have a lifelong fear of water. I never swim, never go boating, nothing. The idea of me sleepwalking to the lake, of all places, seemed impossible. But there I was, lying in the damp grass, a few inches away from where the land dipped into the water. My shoes and pants were wet, and my skin felt clammy from the cold air. The shock of waking up there made me stumble back so fast I nearly slipped into the lake anyway. I told myself it had to be stress, maybe exhaustion, maybe my body adjusting badly to travel, but part of me already knew something wasn't right. On the third day, I stayed longer at the fort, hoping to explore the parts I hadn't yet. Evening came quickly. The lights that had been set up along the restored hallways during my earlier visit were suddenly off. It wasn't a power outage. The courtyard outside still glowed with lamps. Inside, though, the halls were pitch black. I tried to retrace my steps when I felt it. A hand. It grabbed my wrist with a grip so cold it didn't feel human. Not clammy, not sweaty. Cold, like polished metal. It pulled hard, dragging me deeper into the dark hallway. My other hand clawed at the wall for leverage, nails scraping stone. I yanked, twisted, fought, but the grip wouldn't loosen. Panic roared in my chest as I screamed, but the sound just echoed uselessly in the massive space. Then just like that, it stopped. The hand let go and I stumbled forward, only to realize I was no longer inside the fort. I was standing outside my hotel, chest heaving, sweat dripping down my face. My wrist burned where the hand had held me, red and tender, like frostbite. I barely slept that night, but exhaustion eventually won. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I nearly passed out from fear. I wasn't in my bed. I wasn't even in the hotel. I was chained inside the fort. It was one of the prison chambers, deep underground. The stone walls sweated moisture, and the air was thick with rot. Rusty chains locked around my wrists, pinning me to the wall. My throat went dry, and the smell was so overpowering I gagged. I shouted for help until my voice cracked. The fort was supposed to have guards and tourists. Someone should have found me. But the silence was suffocating. It felt like I was sealed off from the world, like I was the only living thing left in that place. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. My wrists ached from struggling, and the chains wouldn't budge. I thought I'd lose my mind in that stinking chamber. Then, without warning, the door creaked open. A guard walked in. He didn't seem alarmed to see me chained there, just pulled out a key and unlocked the cuffs like it was routine. I stumbled outside into the daylight, overwhelmed with relief. I thanked him over and over, but when I stepped out of the gates, I saw another guard leaning against the wall. I tried to thank him too, explaining that his colleague had just saved me. He looked at me strangely, eyes narrowing, and said there was no one else on duty. He'd been the only guard there the whole afternoon. He told me the sun was about to set, and I needed to hurry because I was the last tourist left. I left without another word. Even now, I can't explain any of it. Maybe I did sleepwalk, though it makes no sense how I got into chained rooms or back outside my hotel without anyone noticing. Maybe stress, exhaustion, or some kind of breakdown caused hallucinations. Maybe the fort really does play tricks on people. All I know is I cut my trip short the next morning. I didn't go back to the fort, didn't even say goodbye to the hotel staff. But sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I still feel that icy grip on my wrist. And I can't shake the feeling that one day I'll open my eyes again and find myself back in that chamber. Story number 5. People get scared, but I always believed it was just the mind playing tricks. A shadow in the corner, a creak in an empty hallway, the whisper of the wind at night, nothing more than thoughts haunting you. At least that's what I told myself. That was 5 years ago, before I met her. It started in Spain. My sister was getting married, and my family dragged me along. The days were loud and busy, but the nights were quiet, especially when I slipped out to wander the narrow streets alone. There's something about being in a foreign country at night. Empty roads, closed shutters, and the occasional neon light humming above a corner store. That night, it must have been past midnight when I stopped near a bus stop. I was across the street, leaning against a railing, when I noticed her. She was standing there, tall, thin, wearing a long black dress that almost touched the pavement. She wasn't moving, just staring straight ahead. For a moment, I assumed she was waiting for the bus. And when the bus arrived, its headlights flooding the street, she didn't move. The doors opened, hissed, waited, then shut. The bus rolled away. She stayed still. Something about that should have made me keep walking, but I didn't. I just stood there staring back. The street was dead quiet, but somehow I felt like the air was heavier. When I finally looked away, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound. I boarded the next bus. My chest was tight the whole ride back, but I didn't mention it to anyone. The next day, I told myself it had been nothing. Jet lag, too much wine at the rehearsal dinner. But late that evening, as I wandered near the outskirts of town, I saw her again. She was walking down a narrow, silent path lined with crumbling stone walls and stray vines. This time I followed. The further I walked, the more uneasy I felt. The streetlights grew further apart until it was just shadows stretching on all sides. My shoes scraped against gravel, the sound too loud in the stillness. She moved with slow, deliberate steps, always just ahead of me. At one point, I glanced behind me, for only a second, and she was there, not ahead anymore, but directly behind me, close enough that I could see her face. Her mouth was stretched into a smile too wide, her teeth darkened, red, as if stained with blood. My chest locked up, but when I blinked, she was back in front of me, walking as if nothing had changed. I should have turned around then. I should have gone back, but my feet kept moving. Eventually, she stopped at what looked like an old stone well in the middle of an overgrown clearing. Moss covered its edges, and the wood bucket lay splintered nearby. I froze, unsure whether to approach. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the edge, her black dress swaying slightly in the night air, and then she dropped. Straight down into the well. I sprinted forward. My hands gripped the cold stone rim, and I peered inside. My stomach dropped. There was nothing. No woman, no splash, no echo. The well was bone dry, a hollow throat disappearing into endless darkness. I didn't sleep that night. The strangest part came afterward. Every day somehow, no matter where I tried to wander, I ended up near that well. I didn't notice it at first. It was subtle. I'd leave the hotel planning to go into the city, but my steps would drift, turn after turn, and eventually there I was, standing near it. It began to feel less like coincidence and more like being pulled. The more it happened, the worse I felt. My head throbbed, my chest tightened, and I began catching faint whispers at night. Not words exactly, just a sound like breath against the back of my neck. My family noticed I was pale and distant, but I brushed it off. One evening, I stood there again, near the well. The sky was dusky, painted orange and violet, and the cicadas had just started. I told myself I would look one last time and then leave. But when I turned around, she was there, closer than ever. Her face was inches from mine, her eyes dark and hollow, skin stretched too tightly across her bones. The smell of damp earth filled my nose, and her breath was ice against my cheek. Before I could even gasp, her hands were on me, cold, bony fingers pressed against my chest. And then she shoved. I fell backwards into the well. The world tilted, and I screamed, but the sound was swallowed almost instantly. The walls blurred, the darkness closed in, and my body kept dropping into nothing. My lungs burned as if I was drowning, even though there was no water, just a hollow depth pulling me further. And then I was standing at the bus stop, the same one where I'd first seen her. The streets were empty, silent. I staggered, disoriented, and that's when I realized my clothes were soaked. My shirt clung to my skin, heavy with moisture, though the ground around me was dry. The sky was clear, not a hint of rain. My hair dripped, and the cold seeped into my bones. I don't remember how I got back to the hotel. The next thing I recall is waking in bed, my suitcase half packed for the wedding. I wanted to tell someone, but every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat. The rest of the trip blurred by. My sister's wedding happened, photos were taken, and everyone smiled. I smiled too, though I felt like I was somewhere else entirely. When I came back home, things returned to normal, or at least they were supposed to, but sometimes even now I catch glimpses, like a reflection in a shop window that doesn't match. A woman standing too far down a dark road, the faint smell of damp earth with no rain in sight. And every so often I wake in the middle of the night with my clothes damp, sticking to my skin, as if I've been standing at that well again. I try to tell myself it was just exhaustion, too much stress, my brain twisting the memories into something worse. That's the logical explanation. But the feeling never goes away, because whenever I'm near a bus stop, I still find myself checking across the street, just to see if she's there. And sometimes, I think she is. Story number 6. I don't usually talk about weird stuff, but what happened to me a while ago still keeps me awake some nights. I'm not saying my house is haunted, because I don't even fully believe in that kind of thing. But if I share it down, maybe it'll make sense to someone else. It started on an ordinary afternoon. My mom was doing her usual routine, and I was helping her out. Nothing special. She got a call midway and went to her room to talk, leaving me to finish some chores in the kitchen. While keeping the dishes away, something happened that didn't feel right. I had pulled the drawer open to stack spoons inside. The next second, it slammed shut with such force that it rattled the cabinet. My hand had been right there, and it came within an inch of crushing my fingers. I jerked back, just staring at the closed drawer. The thing is, there wasn't any breeze. No draft, no vibration, no reason for it to close like that. I stood frozen for a bit, then forced myself to laugh it off. Maybe the drawer runners were too old. Later, I decided to clear up the attic since it had been bothering my mom for weeks. The attic was dusty, packed with old trunks and cardboard boxes. I had just started moving things around when out of nowhere, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It wasn't a dull ache. It was like my heart had been stabbed from the inside. I dropped the rag I was holding and clutched my chest, waiting for the next beat that didn't come. My vision blurred for a second, and in my head I was sure I was about to die. Then it just stopped, like nothing had happened. My heart was fine again, beating as if nothing was wrong. I staggered down from the attic, sweating, and called out for my mom. I got no reply. On the dining table was a note in her handwriting saying she'd gone shopping. That confused me, because I was sure she hadn't left the house. She'd just been on a call. I picked up the note, staring at it, and tried to convince myself she had slipped out quietly while I was in the attic. I shook it off and went back to the living room. I was scrolling my phone, sitting with my back to the kitchen. Out of nowhere, there was a sharp thunk right behind me. My stomach dropped when I turned. A kitchen knife was stuck upright in the wall, just a few feet from where my head had been. I swear on my life, it wasn't lying on the counter before. It wasn't wobbling like it had fallen. It was embedded in the wall like someone had thrown it with intent. I checked every corner of the kitchen, every hallway, nothing. The house was empty except for me. That's when I started feeling watched. Not in the obvious horror movie sense, but like someone's attention was fixed on me, just outside my field of vision. My chest felt heavy, like breathing was harder. I went upstairs to my room trying to push it away. I told myself maybe the knife had been leaning weirdly and just slipped off, though I couldn't explain how it got enough force to stab the wall. I sat down at my desk. For maybe half an hour, everything was normal. Then I heard a loud crash from downstairs. My heart jumped into my throat, and I rushed to check. The glass fruit bowl that had been on the dining table was shattered on the floor. It wasn't near the edge when I last saw it. I crouched down to clean it up. That's when my body went strange. First, my legs went numb, like pins and needles, but much heavier. Then my arms followed. Within seconds, I couldn't move. I was crouched awkwardly, bent over the shards, completely limp. My muscles wouldn't respond at all. I was aware, breathing, but trapped inside myself. Panic took over, but there was nothing I could do. My eyes watered from trying to force a twitch out of my body. The air around me felt colder. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but it felt like an eternity. Then I saw movement. My mom was coming down the stairs holding some laundry. She froze when she saw me. Her face turned pale and she rushed over, shaking me and calling my name. Slowly, sensation returned to my arms, then my legs. She helped me up and I almost collapsed against her. What unsettled me most wasn't her panic. It was when I asked about the note. I told her I saw she'd gone shopping. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. She hadn't gone anywhere. She said she'd been upstairs talking to one of her friends the whole time. I walked over to the dining table wanting to show her the note. But the table was bare. Nothing was there. Not even the pen she usually left lying around. She asked what I was talking about, and I had no answer. For the next few hours, she stayed close, but nothing else happened. By night, the house was calm again, like nothing had ever gone wrong. I keep replaying the events in my head, trying to break them down rationally. Maybe the drawer slammed because of uneven hinges. Maybe the pain in my chest was anxiety or a muscle spasm. Maybe the knife somehow slipped, even though that makes little sense. Maybe I hallucinated the note. Maybe the paralysis was a sudden drop in blood pressure or a nerve issue. All of these explanations are possible, but when I put them all together, the sequence, the timing, the way they escalated, it feels harder to brush off. The thing that lingers is how deliberate it all felt. Not random accidents, but like something wanted my attention. Something testing how far it could push before my mom stepped in. Even now, sometimes when I'm alone in the house, I feel that same pressure in the air, like eyes on the back of my neck. Nothing has slammed or flown at me since, but I'll catch myself staring at the kitchen wall where the knife once stuck, waiting for it to happen again. And every time I go near the attic, my chest tightens, just slightly, as if it's reminding me not to forget. Story number 7. I've always heard about ghosts, demons, or anything beyond what you can see and touch, but in stories and movies. I still don't know what really happened that night, but I can't deny the way it felt. Maybe it was exhaustion from double shifts, maybe paranoia, maybe something else entirely. But the memory of it still makes my skin crawl in the middle of the day. It was around 11:30 when I finally clocked out from my second job. My eyes were heavy, but the chill in the night air kept me awake as I walked the usual route home. That's when I noticed the car. It was a dark sedan, nothing out of the ordinary, but it was behind me for too long. The street was mostly empty, so I couldn't convince myself it was coincidence. At first, I brushed it off. People live in my neighborhood. Maybe they were going the same way. But every time I turned, the car turned too. Every time I slowed down, it slowed down. The sound of tires crunching faintly on gravel matched my pace in the most unnatural way. By the time I reached my street, the car pulled up close behind me and stopped. No headlights, no interior light, just a silent black shape parked a little too close. My stomach dropped. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I bolted up the short walkway to my house and unlocked the door as fast as my shaky hands would allow. Just as the lock clicked, I swore I felt a cold gust of air hit me, like I'd opened a freezer door. Inside, the house felt wrong. I can't explain it. It wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I've lived alone for 2 years, so I know what quiet feels like. But this was different. It was as if something was already inside, waiting. Out of instinct, I checked each room. Everything looked fine. Nothing moved. No shadows that didn't belong. But then I noticed the faint sound of water. The bathroom tap was running full blast, spilling water over the sink and flooding the tiles. My socks squished as I stepped in. My heart was pounding. I never leave taps running. It's almost a compulsion at this point. I check them before leaving the house every single day. Yet the water was ice cold and fresh, like it had only just been turned on. I twisted the knob shut, wiped down the mess, and told myself it was just exhaustion. Maybe I'd slipped up. Maybe I hadn't. As I scrubbed the floor dry, something hit the window. Hard. Glass rattled and I jumped back, nearly slipping. It was a bat, its wings flapping wildly, smearing the glass with tiny streaks of blood before it darted off into the dark. My chest was tight, every nerve on edge. It was nearly 1 by the time I crawled into bed. My body ached from work and adrenaline, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded louder than usual. Just when I thought I might drift off, the knocking started. It wasn't timid. It wasn't someone politely testing if I was awake. It was loud, deliberate knocks, 3 at a time, like someone wanted me to know they were there. My throat went dry as I forced myself to the door. Looking out through the peephole, all I saw was darkness. No one on the porch. Just the same black car in the driveway, parked at the same angle as before, like it hadn't moved all night. The windows were tinted darker than anything I'd seen. I couldn't make out a shape inside, but I felt eyes on me. I shut the door fast and locked everything. Every latch, every window, even the back door I rarely touched. I told myself that would be enough. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of running water again. The same steady hiss echoing through the house. My chest tightened. I crept toward the bathroom, and sure enough, the tap was on. Water spilling over the sink like before. I had closed it. I knew I had. My hands shook as I twisted it off again. And then the knocks started again. Only this time, they weren't knocks. They were violent bangs, shaking the wood in its frame. Heavy, angry kicks, like someone desperate to break in. My heart nearly stopped. I pressed my eye to the peephole, but there was nothing. Just emptiness, as if the banging didn't exist. And then, crash. Another bat slammed against the door, wings flapping, screeching. I stumbled back, my legs weak beneath me. I didn't check again. I ran straight to my room, locked the door, and sat on the bed, waiting. The noise stopped after a while, but the silence that replaced it was worse. My skin crawled. Every few minutes, I felt something, like a weight brushing against the blankets, like the faintest pressure on my chest or legs. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. It felt like something crawling over me, slow and deliberate. I stayed like that until morning. When the first gray light came through the curtains, I finally dared to move. My body was stiff from staying frozen in one position all night. I forced myself out of the room. The bathroom sink was dry this time, like nothing had happened. The front door looked normal, no scratches, no dents. I thought maybe I had dreamed it. Maybe my brain had manufactured the whole thing out of fear and fatigue. But then I opened the front door. The driveway was empty. The car was gone. In its place, on the wet concrete leading away from the house, were footprints. Large, bare footprints, soaked as if someone had just walked out of water. They stretched out across the driveway and disappeared into the street. They were too big to be mine, too fresh to be old. I stood there for a long time staring at them, trying to explain it away. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the car had nothing to do with me. Maybe the water was a plumbing glitch. Maybe the bats were coincidence. I've told myself all of that over and over again. But every night when I get home, I still check the taps twice. I still check the locks 3 times. I still look out the window to make sure no car is waiting for me. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, I swear I can still hear faint knocks, like someone reminding me they haven't gone far. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.